The most rational thing to do is to believe in God. Because if you do, and God exists, you will spend an eternity in heaven. And if you do, but God does not exist, then there is simply no afterlife. So, at best, you win heaven, and at worst, you lose nothing. But if God does exist, and you don't believe in him, then you'll burn in hell forever. And if God does not exist, and you also don't believe in him, well, then there is no afterlife either. This, in essence, is Pascal's wager, a famous argument that says belief in God is the most rational course of action for anyone to take. Ironically, the argument is perhaps most famous for its many refutations and obvious counter-arguments that immediately pop up into your mind as soon as you hear about it. For example, recently Pascal's wager surfaced again in online discourse where people on X, or Twitter, were dunking on it. I decided to make this quick video to elaborate a bit on the purpose of the wager and the bigger context that surrounds the wager, context that many people simply are not aware of. And by the way, follow us on X if you're so inclined. Don't miss out on banger tweets such as this one, or book reviews, or learning why Schopenhauer didn't want to be buried for 5 full days after his death. With that said, let's look at Pascal's wager in its broader context and see why some of the refutations fall short. The two most common objections you'll find online today are the following. 1. If you only believe in God to win eternal heaven, then that's not a sincere belief, and God will obviously not fall for your trick. 2. Christianity is not the only religion. Pascal's wager works just as well with any other religion. Therefore, if you pick the wrong God to believe in, the wager still falls flat, and the odds are not in your favor anymore. There are many other counter-arguments, but these two are the most common ones, and so we'll focus on these two for the purposes of this video. And by the way, I'm not saying I personally believe in Pascal's wager, or even God, and as we'll see, it's not really a question of is the wager true or not. I'm simply saying that these common counter-arguments that do the rounds online are not good counter-arguments. So let's dig a little bit deeper. First, we need to look at the purpose of the wager. It's not meant to be a proof of God's existence. In fact, it's not meant to be a proof of anything. The wager appears in a book that was published after Blaise Pascal's death, called the Pensées, which roughly means thoughts. They are a collection of notes that were compiled and published posthumously, and there is no consensus even as to in which order these notes should appear in the final book. The Pensées do not set out a rigorous system of philosophy or theology. They are loose fragments that can be thematically arranged for sure, but they are not a complete system and they should not be regarded as such. Within these pages you'll find plenty of philosophy and theology, but also observations on social life in the 17th century, pithy maxims, and loose thoughts. Long paragraphs interspersed with short aphorisms. Pascal, writing originally in French, borrows a lot from the style of Montaigne, who practically invented the essay. The Pensées are therefore not easily categorized as this or as that, and the nature of the book, being an amalgamation of many different thoughts, makes it a unique piece of writing. So when we take a look at Pascal's wager as he originally wrote it down, and consider the broader context of the work in which it appears, we get a first clue as to how we should approach the wager, as a thought experiment, literally a pensée. In fact, elsewhere in the book, Pascal explicitly states that reason is not enough to acquire true faith. Therefore, that the wager, being a reasonable thought experiment, can never lead to faith. The Christian religion, which alone has reason, does not acknowledge as her true children those who believe without inspiration. Inspirations alone can produce a true and saving effect. Well then, what is the purpose of the thought experiment? It's supposed to be a wake-up call. What is at stake here is nothing less than the fate of your immortal soul. A big theme in the Pensées is Pascal's astonishment as to how little people seem to care about their souls. The immortality of the soul is a matter which is of so great importance to us, and which touches us so profoundly, that we must have lost all feeling to be indifferent as to knowing what it is. We're not used to speak about the soul in this way in the modern age. That doesn't matter. Pascal simply means to say that the afterlife, the great infinity that lies beyond our mortal life, should be of the greatest concern to us. Saving ourselves from eternal hellfire should be the number one priority of every living human, because no amount of pleasure in our finite, short life could ever measure up to eternal damnation. Yet, how surprising, says Pascal, how little people seem to care for it. You'd expect everyone to become a philosopher, but the exact opposite is true. Speaking of the average person, Pascal writes, "They are afraid of mere trifles, they foresee them, they feel them. And this same man, who spends so many days and nights in rage and despair for the loss of office or for some imaginary insult to his honor, is the very one who knows, without anxiety and without emotion, that he will lose all by death. It is a monstrous thing to see." The wager is meant to shake you out of your stupor. Pascal is trying to say, wake up, your soul is at stake here. Why do you think so rarely about the afterlife? Again, the purpose of the wager is not to prove anything. Its purpose, as Pascal wrote it down, is to shock you into action, to start you on your search for religious truth. The greatest sin for Pascal is not being wrong about God's existence, but not caring about God at all, not even thinking about it, passing day by day in this short mortal life while the infinitely greater afterlife is only a few years away. The purpose of the wager is at least to make you think, and to consider that an eternity in hellfire just might await you. The purpose of the wager is not to turn you into a believer. It's meant to put you on the path towards becoming one. A big theme throughout the Pensées is that Pascal wants to motivate you to get started on your own religious journey. He just so happens to believe that you'll end up believing in the Christian God if you do so. That's why the wager focuses on the Christian God and the Christian God alone. If we know this, we technically already know enough to tackle the two objections to the wager we raised earlier. But for the sake of completeness, let's explicitly tackle them. Objection 1. If you only believe in God for the sole purpose of getting into heaven, that's not authentic belief, and God won't be tricked by your insincerity. On its face, this is obviously true, and Pascal obviously knew this too, which is why that's not actually the argument he's making in the first place. For Pascal, you need three things to come to sincere faith: reason, custom, and inspiration. The wager is an appeal to reason. Any reasonable person can understand the decision matrix that the wager offers. They might not agree with the contents, but at least they understand the argument. But reason is not enough. It's just one of three ingredients. The other two being first custom, or actually acting like a Christian, going to church, taking the Eucharist, etc., even if you haven't arrived at real belief yet. And second, inspiration, which Pascal believes will come to you on its own if you sincerely make an effort to open up yourself to faith. Pascal knows full well that just the wager by itself is not enough to move someone to embrace faith. It is the heart which experiences God, and not the reason. This, then, is faith. God felt by the heart, not by the reason. Reason is not enough to come to belief, and therefore simply accepting Pascal's wager on account of the heavenly award that awaits you, a decision informed by reason, cannot be sufficient to attain true faith. So yes, of course, God won't be tricked by a would-be believer who only believes in him to win a prize in heaven. But such a rational decision to believe could never lead to real faith anyway, and Pascal already addresses this. When people present it as a counter-argument to Pascal's wager, it's not just random people online. Voltaire famously had the same objection. It falls flat because it can only work if you purposefully ignore the context of the wager, what its purpose is, and how Pascal believes you come to faith. That brings us to objection number 2. We mentioned Voltaire already. His French Enlightenment colleague, Denis Diderot, also made a quip to object to Pascal's wager. A Muslim might make the exact same argument and still be right. Very true. So it would seem that Pascal's wager is not such a cut-and-dry decision after all, because there are possibly an infinite number of religions, and they all tend to claim that only they are the one true religion. So the odds of the wager suddenly don't look so good. How do you know that the Christian God is the correct one to believe in? Again, you can only make this counter-argument if you purposefully divorce the wager from the context in which it was written. Pascal was a scientist and a math prodigy. He was a smart guy. Obviously, he knew about other religions. It turns out, he addresses them directly in the rest of the book. He has his reasons to believe in the Christian faith as the only true faith. Those reasons and arguments are too numerous to list. In the Gutenberg edition of the Pensées, freely accessible to anyone with an internet connection, there is an entire chapter entitled Proofs of Jesus Christ. You can disagree with his reasons for claiming that Christianity is the one true religion. For example, one argument he uses is that Jesus Christ fulfills the prophecies made in the Old Testament. We can see the circular reasoning here, apart from the fact even that it's very possible, although Pascal didn't believe this himself, that many of the New Testament texts were altered specifically to make Jesus fit the prophecies made in the Old Testament. Again, that's completely fine. What is not fine is saying that the wager is invalid because a million other religions exist, as if Pascal wasn't aware of this and didn't address this very objection in literally the same book that you are arguing against. The wager is not meant to prove that Christianity is the one true religion. An entire different chapter in the book is trying to do that. You should address the arguments in that chapter, not criticize the wager for not doing something that it's not even trying to do. So to reiterate and clear up the confusion, the wager is not meant to prove the existence of God. It's not an argument for God's existence. It's a thought experiment designed to make you think about your immortal soul, something that most people, according to Pascal, don't think nearly enough about. Considering that your infinite afterlife is at stake, Pascal hopes that by thinking about the wager, you'll start out on the journey to learn more about the afterlife. He believes that if you make an honest effort, eventually you will come to embrace Christianity. Not just through reason, but also through acting like a Christian, and ultimately receiving some kind of divine inspiration, which will make your transformation into a sincere believer complete. Again, you can disagree with whether or not that's true or that will happen. Pascal seems to believe that anyone who makes an honest effort to understand the divine will arrive at Jesus Christ. You can think that's not true. You can disagree with that, but that's not the point of the wager. The wager is simply a motivational kickstart, something to make you consider what's at stake when you think about the big questions of life. And the point of the wager is you cannot not play. You have to make a choice. Either believe, seek to believe, or don't believe. We all fall into one of those three categories, whether we want to or not. Pascal himself is actually surprisingly forgiving to people who don't arrive at the faith, so long as they make an honest effort to really think about these matters. On the other hand, he is visibly upset, frustrated, even dumbfounded when people don't seem to care enough about the big questions. All that Pascal asks of you, and all that the wager is trying to accomplish, is that you make an effort to think. Thank you for watching. Usually we talk about Nietzsche and Schopenhauer here on the channel, so this is quite a departure from our usual content, but hopefully you enjoyed it all the same. If you haven't already, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, so we know to make more of this type of content in the future and branch out from our familiar Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. Also, apparently 80% of people who watch the channel aren't subscribed, so we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel, as it helps out a lot with reaching more people. Plus, you'll be notified when we release new videos. With that said, as always, a special thank you goes out to our Patreons who keep the channel alive. If you want to join their ranks and get access to a dozen exclusive videos and book reviews, definitely take a look and support the channel while you're at it. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.